Now, a great deal of time, sweat, and a few tears were expended on all this, but there's a lot of satisfaction in developing ideas into realities which become a part of Disney.
Silly Symphonies is a run of animation shorts created by the Walt Disney Company between 1929 and 1939. With 75 in total, all were distributed during the golden age of animation, a period of animation between the very late 1920s and early 1960s that began with the popularisation of sound in animation and cartoon, but ended with the decrease in popularity of animated shorts thanks to the invention of the television. Of course, there are Silly Symphony shorts that many people have heard of, such as The Dancing Skeletons and The Three Little Pigs, but it's obvious that these cartoons haven't been gifted the longevity and recognisability of its counterparts produced around the same time, such as Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry. I honestly blame this on the Disney Company's own refusal to distribute Silly Symphonies on their network. I think that if the Walt Disney Company had aired their shorts on their networks, we would be in a very different position right now with very different childhoods. And they are classics, not just because of their age, but because of their influence and advancements in technology for cinema. The Silly Symphonies series of shorts would pioneer new techniques in animation and film that pushed the boundaries of what a cartoon could do. This is the history of Silly Symphony. In the late 1920s, Walter Eliza Disney was already a household name, most famed for his Mickey Mouse shorts, Steamboat Willie in particular. Steamboat Willie had been created a year earlier, being the first Mickey Mouse short to be distributed, and the first cartoon in history to feature synchronized sound. The score for Steamboat Willie and many of the other shorts was performed by Carl W. Stalling, now most famed for his work on Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, spending most of his career being commissioned by Warner Bros. Stalling had met Disney back when Stalling and Disney had had a chance encounter the year prior. Both men were impressed with the other and agreed to work with each other. Despite having a great deal of respect for one another, Walter and Stalling would argue about music, a lot. Disney was not a musical man and couldn't see limits. He would often try to make the action scenes in his shorts longer or shorter than Stalling's composition, and struggled to understand why Stalling couldn't just adjust the composition accordingly. Eventually Disney made a deal with Stalling where if Stalling could make music to fit Disney's action in the Mickey Mouse shorts, they would create a new show together with the action being made to fit Stalling's music. In short, the Mickey Mouse shorts were to be exactly as Walt wanted them, with Stalling adjusting his music to match, and Silly Symphonies was to be animated to synchronise perfectly to Stalling's music, composed exactly how he wanted it. The concept of Silly Symphonies was conceived between 1928 and 1929. During that time, studios were scrambling to pay for technology that would add synchronized audios to their movie after the release of the first talking picture in 1928. Of course, Disney, who has often been described as living his life in the future rather than the present, was excited to pursue animation with synchronized sound. And after Stalling had proposed his idea for the first Silly Symphony, Disney grew excited about this project too, writing to his brother Rob, "Carl's idea of the skeleton dance for a musical novelty has been growing on me. I think it has dandy possibilities. It would be dandy with all different effects in it." Describing his ideas for the short, Disney said they could use bats and other spooky things, weird music, the skeletons playing a tune on their ribs, playing a tune on different sized tombstones, dancing and rattling of the bones, some of them playing instruments and all kinds of goofy gags. It wouldn't be so terribly hard to make if we made use of repeats, and music is full of repeats. The music for the skeleton dance was recorded around January or February 1929, while Stalling and Disney were in New York. Disney's only animator at the time, Ub Iwerks, would animate in the Disney studio in Los Angeles while they were gone. Iwerks was able to animate while the composition of the short was being recorded because of a system created during the making of Steamboat Willie. All that was needed for perfect synchronization of the music and action was Iwerks' exposure sheet to match Stalling's bar sheet. Once the first Silly Symphony was completed, Disney found it hard to distribute it. One cinema stated that it was too gruesome. Eventually Disney managed to have the skeleton dance play at a theatre in New York, and then at a theatre in Los Angeles, with it being very well received. This got the attention of Columbia Pictures, who offered to distribute Silly Symphonies. Disney agreed, though this would be a mistake. Between 1928 and 1930, Disney would create a short-lived sound studio in Los Angeles, hire more animators, and lose iWorks due to issues with paying Columbia Pictures. Stalling left a few weeks after iWorks, stating that something didn't feel right with him gone. Before Stalling and iWorks left, another 6 Silly Symphonies would be produced, with Autumn being the Silly Symphony the pair would work on with Disney last. In 1929, another experienced animator Disney had hired, Burt Gillett, had become just as important as iWorks in his position at the Disney studio, and went on to direct many Silly Symphonies after iWorks' departure. Burt Lewis would provide the scores up until 1931. After hiring more animators, Disney had devised a new system of animation production. More experienced animators like iWorks and Gillett would do the more expressive and detailed drawings that mattered most, whilst novice animators labelled in-betweeners would do the rest of the images. This had led to great synchronisation with the animation and music, because on beats the animation was exact and precise, but sketchy and amateur the rest of the time. Around 1930, assistants at the studio began to improve their drawings and make in-betweens. However, this system had its downfalls. Early shorts often suffered with glitches or frames where characters looked significantly different from the one before. And in the early 1930s, the Disney company found itself in troubled waters, especially financially. Columbia Pictures' pay for each Silly Symphony seemed high until Disney needed to pay for more animators and more expensive animation. On top of this, Disney was in the process of upgrading his studios, and it was costing him $250,000 to do so. Almost every Silly Symphony between 1930 and 1931 was postponed due to production delays, and Disney suffered mental anguish over these matters until he took a vacation with his wife. In a letter to their parents, his brother Roy wrote, "Walt is feeling much better than he was before his vacation, but he's not back to his old self. Things are going much better at the studio, so it is much less of a nerve-wracking job for him than it was before."
The best advice I have ever given to students who have studied under me has been just this: educate yourself. Do not let me educate you. Robert Henry would advise, don't imitate anyone. He says, one of the great difficulties of an art student is to decide between his own natural impressions and what he thinks should be his impressions. And in another page, go forward with what you have to say, expressing things as you see them. Time after time in his art spirit, Henry says, be yourself. Here at the studio, we have many artists who have achieved national reputation as painters, in addition to their accomplishments in the field of animation. These men know the value of Henry's advice to be yourself.
Once Disney had hired animators, he became more of a story man, providing concept for his employees to work with. But in 1931, Disney hired 2 so-called gag men, Ted Sears and Webb Smith. Rather than being hands-on and involved, Disney was now the coordinator of the talent around him. In 1956, speaking on the matter, he said, "People don't attach any importance to the coordinating of all the talent that goes into these things. The vital part I played is coordinating these talents and encouraging these talents. I have an organisation over there of people who are really specialists. You can't match them anywhere in the world for what they can do, but they all need to be pulled together." After this point, only a single Silly Symphony labelled Walt Disney as the director. This is in contrast to the very early Silly Symphonies from 1928, where Walt Disney would be credited here and there. With Disney more focused on his job of directing talent, he decided that animators should have to perform pencil tests, where the fluidity and the movement of the animation could be tested before the process of inking and colouring. This would result in more pleasing work, the quality of which wasn't compromised by the quantity of people who worked on it. The last big development in 1931 was the addition of composer Frank Churchill, who alongside the aforementioned Bert Lewis would provide music for silly symphonies, his first one being for Silly Symphonies 18, The China Plate. He would also go on to do the music for Disney's Golden Age movies such as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Pinocchio. Despite coming to an agreement with Columbia Pictures in 1930 about ceasing their distribution of Silly Symphonies, and already finding a new distributor in United Artists 8 months later, Disney's contract with the company didn't end until 1932. United Artists agreed to double the budget for each Silly Symphony from $7,000 to $15,000, or adjusted for inflation, from $140,000 to $280,000. It was a good deal for Disney, but United Artists wanted something for their company in exchange. They wanted to be associated with the Mickey Mouse who had quickly become a worldwide sensation. During its distribution through United Artists, Silly Symphony had to have a title card which read, Mickey Mouse Presents a Silly Symphony. This was a minor inconvenience that Disney was willing to deal with for his bigger budget.
If you had it to do over again, would you do any part of it differently?
Well, if I had it to do over again, I think, no, I don't think I would.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars.
I don't know. I hope I don't have to do it over again.